Tech team, can we ask you a favor? Between now and the council meeting, could you resend to all alders the invitation to attend the council meeting? Um, we have gotten hundreds of emails and I'm getting a sense that for some alders it may be buried.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. We can just click resend.
Thank you. That's appreciated.
Paul, are you gonna go in and grab that?
Alder Martin, can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thank you. Gonna wait a couple minutes more for Alder Harrington McKinney. I'm going to text her to see if she's able to join. Oh, good, Alder Balde is here.
It sounds like Alder Harrington McKinney is having trouble finding the email with the link, so I just resent her.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Alder Balde, can you hear me? Alder Balde?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Just that. Let's just wait another couple of minutes. Hopefully Alder Harrington McKinney can join. Getting us ready for this meeting. So thank you. We will get started with our Common Council Executive Committee meeting of March 31st, 2020. Welcome all to our virtual meeting. I'm going to read some instructions for those in the public that will you. If you have any written comments that you would like to send to the CCC, you can use the allalders@cityofmadison.com email. That would be allalders@cityofmadison.com. You can watch the meeting and you can do so via audio by dialing 312-626-6799, webinar ID 954-410-442. You can also live stream on the Madison City Channel website. I will not read the long email, the wrong address, but you can just find that on the city's website. You can live stream on the City of Madison YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/user/City of Madison. You can watch us live on Charter Digital 994 and AT&T Uverse 99. You can watch the meeting using the Zoom app, and you can find those instructions under www.cityofmadison.com/virtual-CECC. And if you want to register but do not wish to speak, you can send your registration through www.cityofmadison.com/comment-CECC. And you can register and speak also by using that same link. With that, I'm going to ask our Chief of Staff to do a roll call. Be unmuted, Kwesi.
Thank you. Alder Bidar?
Present.
Alder Bidar is here. Alder Harrington McKinney? I think
Sorry.
you're unmuted.
Sorry. Yes, I need to unmute all, right?
Everybody's unmuted now.
Yeah.
Alder Harrington McKinney?
Present.
Alder Harrington McKinney is here. Alder Martin?
Here.
Alder Martin is here. Evers?
Here.
Alder Evers is here. Alder Carter?
Here.
Alder Carter is here. Alder Foster?
Here.
Alder Foster is here. Alder Campbell?
Here.
Alder Campbell is here. Alder Balday?
Yes.
Alder Balday is here. Madam President, we have quorum.
Thank you so much. Our next agenda item is the approval of minutes from our agenda of March of a motion. Raise your hand. Alder Campbell for a motion.
Move approval.
Can I have a hand for a second? Alder Harrington McKinney.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do I have anybody wishing to speak on this item? I see none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye, moving your head. And what we are going to do is we will register this as a unanimous vote unless I see anybody raising their hand wanting to be registered otherwise. I see nobody raising their hands, so we have registered this as a unanimous vote. The next item is public comment. Member of the tech staff, do we have anybody register for general public comment?
We do not.
Thank you. The next item is disclosures and recusals. Do we have any disclosures and recusals from members of the body? If so, raise your hand. I see none. The next item is referrals from the Common Council. The first item is item number 5, Legistar number 59845, establishing a body-worn camera feasibility review committee as recommended by the Madison Police Department Policy and Procedure Review Ad Hoc Committee. Can I have a motion? I see Alder Harrington McKinney for a motion. Go ahead, Alder Harrington McKinney.
I move adoption.
Do I have a second? Alder Evers.
Second.
Thank you. And now we have discussion and we have members of our staff, including Deputy Mayor Cam McClay and Chief Wall that are here to answer questions. So let's entertain first questions for them. So if I can have anybody that has question raise their hand. Alder Carter.
see
Sorry.
that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So there's been discussions on body cameras going back to 2014, and there's also a report that was submitted, I believe, in 2015. So what are you looking at that's different from what we have not only voted on, but what reports have been submitted?
Alder Carter, is this a question for a specific member for Deputy Mayor McClay or for Chief Wall?
Chief Wall, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Chief Wall, I am going to unmute you so you can speak. Yes.
Sure.
Unmuted.
This resolution is not originating from MPD, and it's not so.
You froze, which
I think compromise on all the body camera recommendations that were in the OIR report was just to sort of, I think, delay further discussion and action on that. So it's not something we're pushing for. I'm with the general original resolution. I'm not in support of some of the language that was added in during the committee processes here. But it is something I hear from time to time in the community, an interest in revisiting body cameras. So I think there's an interest in the community on it, and certainly times have, several years have passed since the original committee discussed it, and I think there's, some improvements to technology, and it's probably worth taking a fresh look at it if done properly.
Any additional questions, Alder Carter?
Yes, I do. So, and maybe this question should be for Deputy Cam McClay, if he's on, or even Marcia, who's one of the sponsors. I guess what I'm looking at is that we have significant amount of information from the past, including the community committee that came and presented to the council that stated that the community in general did not feel that they would be any more safer with police with body cameras or without. That was at a time when we were looking at actually a pilot program when we're going to be given body cameras for a certain period of time. So with that, will this group, whether it's exploratory or what, be utilizing some of that information that we already have and not trying to recreate the wheel and not utilizing some of that information?
Deputy Chief McClay, I have unmuted you if you would like to respond.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, as I think Chief Wall was saying, this wasn't necessarily a recommendation that our office, any more than the police department, pushed forward. Where this does come from, though, is the original ad hoc final recommendations. The very last one, recommendation 177, called for the creation of a committee to be comprised of members of the ad hoc, members of the original body camera study group, and members of the MPD to explore the questions from the OIR report. And they specifically enumerate, recommendations 134 from 139. Now, what those were all things relative to body-worn cameras, right? And so from the standpoint of a value add, the offering of someone to look at the issue of body-worn cameras is something that I think is probably a good idea. Meaning the problem is very nuanced, it's very complex. If the Madison Police Department ever envisions wanting to implement a body-worn camera program, only way we'll be able to do it is with like really, really robust community engagement, right? So if this body wants to focus its efforts on researching the body-worn camera question, I think that that would be something of a value add. The additional language, as you heard Chief Wall mention, that was added at the Equal Opportunities Commission, expanding the scope of the of that committee, you know, is arguably a little bit less helpful. I mean, the language that was added talks about the committee may address other issues relative to the implementation of other recommendations in the ad hoc committee if recommended by council. Now, the TFOG's recommendations that we have fewer, not more committees notwithstanding, the challenge I see here is what we're proposing is the creation of a task force committee rather than a standing one. And a task force committee really needs a really specific job we're asking them to do and a realistic time frame in which to do it, a finite time frame, whether it's an end date or a deliverable. This additional language creates a level of complexity that I can envision to be problematic, in as much as particularly it is duplicative of the existing role of the Public Safety Review Committee, right? So if the intention is to research body-worn cameras and have this committee do it, I think it makes perfect sense from a change management standpoint, because neither the MPD nor any of the rest of us have the bandwidth right now to research this topic. But if we want them to be expanding to a host of other issues, then we run into potential conflict with the role of the PSRC and conflict between the mayor's office, the police department, HR, and we're working really hard to implement the primary recommendation from the ad hoc, which was the creation of the civilian auditor or monitor position and the oversight committee to accompany it. So all of our effort has been really focused on what the ad hoc committee said was most important to them. And so, you know, to be focused on the concrete and on the body-worn cameras, I can see as adding value. To have duplicative roles, I think could create some confusion that might actually slow down what's most important to us. I hope that made sense.
Thank you. Can I just a point of clarification, the motion that's before us right now is the original resolution. That was the motion with a second. So that's what's before us.
I got you. Okay.
Just clarifying for everybody. Additional questions by alders. Alder Harrington-McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to add, so Alder Carter had asked about the original committee that had looked at body-worn cameras, and would their findings be included or looked at? And the answer is yes, because that was one of the discussions of the Public Safety Review Committees. One of the requests is to take a look at that very robust conversation and the outcome of that committee. And so we had requested to be able to take a look back and see what the evidence, not the evidence, but what was the occurrences that happened in that committee and to reread that report. But I agree that we really should have very defined and very specific guidelines so that we can really produce the outcome that that is intended by this committee.
Again, questions for staff at this point. Alder Ball with a question for staff.
So my question is basically, I know this may not be well known now, but if, for example, this committee is approved and it is set up, what is the expected cost, for example, for cameras? I mean, does anybody have any feeling around how much this will cost the city if in case, in fact, the committee was approved and recommends that we, in fact, implement a pilot project or a full-fledged body-worn cameras for the police department?
Chief Wall, I'm going to turn that to you.
I think a number of years ago, about the time when the previous committee was up and running, we did some cost estimates. And I think the cost estimate for a sort of full operational deployment of a body camera program was close to $1 million. And I think the pilot was in the $90,000 range. Now, we're a few years out from that, and we have not refreshed those numbers. So that might certainly change depending on new technology, new costs, new server storage needs, but that's the ballpark.
Any additional questions, Alder Boulder?
Just one more question. So I think one thing that really brought about this conversation of body-worn cameras and things like that is the relationship generally between police or law enforcement and communities around the country. Are you able to speak to where that is right now in regards to MPD and the community?
In terms of how the general sort of state of trust or how body cameras might impact it?
No, your relationship with the community. I mean, in the last few years, it has been that, communities of color particularly and how they relate to police was not good. And so the thinking was that having body-worn cameras can help sometimes and some of the suspicion around what is happening between the law enforcement community and people of color. So, I mean, in other words, what necessitates looking at this again? Just going back to Sari's previous question.
Well, I think on the larger question of how we're doing with public trust, I think we're in decent shape, but we've certainly got plenty of room for improvement. I mean, it's something we put a lot of time and effort into, building relationships and devote a lot of resources and effort to. So certainly we've got plenty of room to grow. And I personally don't view the body camera issue through that prism.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about how body cameras will improve public trust and things like that. And to me, those are all sort of ancillary. I look at it just more from a practitioner that in terms of having evidence and demonstrate, whether it's for internal complaints or criminal investigations, having that evidence of a body camera can help a prosecution. It could help the city defend itself against, frivolous lawsuits and things like that. I mean, we have in-car video in the squad cameras that we've had for decades, and we don't view those through a prism of public trust generally. It's more for just this is an operational expectation of professional police agencies these days. And that's sort of how I view the body camera thing. Now, I think there can be benefits to public trust in the cases of critical incidents because the body camera can give you some evidence that's impartial and that can help the community sort of recognize what happened, good or bad. So I think it can have some, ancillary benefit to community trust and support, but I don't necessarily view that as the core reason to pursue them.
All right. Well, thank you.
I see Alder Carter. We're still at questions for staff. So Alder Carter, you have another question?
Not for staff.
Okay, then we'll end the questions for staff and then start discussion. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
I see no other questions for staff, so we're at discussion now. Alder Campbell.
I would like to move an amendment adopting the language that was adopted at the Equal Opportunities Commission. And if I get a second, I'll explain why.
If somebody would like to second, please raise your hand. Alder Evers.
Second.
Alder Campbell.
Okay, am I unmuted? All right, lowering my hand. Okay, so this is a long, strange trip that is ending up with this and the next item on our agenda, item number 6, requesting that the Madison Police Department create a summary document of MPD policy and procedure review ad hoc committee recommendations. So when we, if you will all recall, when we adopted the report of the ad hoc committee, we changed the language to adopt it, as well as adopting their recommendations, which were modified by both the PSRC and the Equal Opportunities Commission at the time to set up a committee. And I think in the language of that recommendation, it said an oversight committee. And then it also specifically referenced the 4 body cam, the resolution number 177 with the 4 body cam recommendations. And both the PSRC and the EOC felt it was very important for those that had been working on the recommendations, develop the recommendations, to be able to assist the Common Council as we provided our oversight over this policy that we adopted, the policy of adopting all of the recommendations. And so both of those bodies also added to the recommendation that this new committee should be made up of former ad hoc committee, Madison Police and Policy Review ad hoc committee members, former body cam committee members, and 1 member from PSRC and 1 member from EOC, because both of those bodies had a keen intention and interest in following up, not just on body cam, but in all of the recommendations. So at the EOC meeting, the EOC members were asking, what happened to our recommendation? What is this body-worn camera committee? Is this what we had asked for when we asked for, we want the committee to track, to be tracking all of the recommendations? And the answer to that is that original intention got framed into these 2 items, number 5 and 6 on our agenda today, split off so that MPD is doing the matrix of all the recommendations. And then this committee will be just looking at body-worn camera, those 4 items in the recommendation 177. So at EOC, we voted 6-1 to add this language, be it further resolved that the committee may address issues related to the implementation of other recommendations from the ad hoc committee report if referred to them by the Common Council. So that gives that, the thought behind that is to basically to give us, as we monitor based on, this item number 6 that will be coming up, based on, a report we get from MPD, as we monitor those things, we can have access to the people who develop the recommendations, who will be sitting on this committee. If we have any questions or concerns, we want their formal input on. So of course, we can always get input by individuals 1 by 1 coming to us as we take up the whole of the recommendations. But that tends to give certain individuals outsized influence in the process. And not everyone is motivated every time to track our agenda and to, see when this is coming up. So we thought that having this committee as a backup for us, for them to be able to think together and mull over and debate within themselves instead of just having individual opinions about how other recommendations are being implemented, would be good for us as public policymakers and as the body who is tasked with actually overseeing the implementation of all of these adopted recommendations. So I just wanted to explain that.
Thank you. I have a number of alders wishing to speak. Next is Alder Carter.
Yes, thank you. So a couple things. If the council's able to add other items for them to look at, is this task force turning into a permanent committee, or does the task force have a sunset? And my second question is, if they are to provide us with a report, is this another instance where we're going to have to hire a consultant to write the report for the task force? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Alder Furman.
I definitely share similar concerns that Alder Carter pointed out about this committee, or at least the modification of the committee. I understand the request to do the body-worn camera. Looking at that, that's a specific recommendation, but I am fearful about letting that committee have scope creep and do a lot more stuff. Where does that end? Why wouldn't we be using the Public Safety Review Committee, or even the Oversight Committee that's going to be in place at some point? Or why don't we consider possibly reinstituting the Madison Police Department Policy and Procedure Review Ad Hoc Committee? I know that those guys met forever. It seems like this is going to be a much more complicated committee than what the original intent was based on that amendment. So, and I think that's a mistake.
Thank you, Alder Furman. Alder Campbell.
So just to address those questions, is that this basically is a little over half of the former ad hoc committee. And the reason to use this instead of PSRC is that they are literally the people who developed the recommendations and understand the spirit and all of the discussions and all of the, everything that went into creating them, which the PSRC does not have that capacity. So it would just be, a help. And it's not saying that they're overseeing everything. It's just saying that within their scope, if we as a council are having questions about what do they mean about this, what do they mean about that, is the way it's being implemented, in sync with that we have them as a resource to go to. And I don't think it's adding a ton more work for them. It's just something that we as a council can have in our back pocket to inform our decisions in a much more robust way. So I don't think, this resolution has a sunset of, I believe, President Badar is at December 31st of this year. The last version we were working on together, that's...
Yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be done at the end of the year. And our ability to have them as a resource, and I don't think is an undue scope creep.
Thank you. And then next I have Alder Balde.
So I basically just, in addition to the questions that were asked, I'm just wondering, why is it that we cannot get the police department to give the same report, because they are responsible for, we are being monitoring, or they are giving report around. The other thing is that I think for equity purposes, it is important that we have a new set of eyes on this committee as opposed to using the same old folks. Not that they've not been doing an excellent job, but I do think for equity purposes, if we are doing this, it is important that we look at other, a set of eyes to have a look at this.
Thank you, Alder Balde. Next, I have Alder Foster in the queue. Give me 1 second. Go ahead, Alder Foster.
Thanks. I actually had a question for Attorney May, but it looks like he may have turned into a bookcase. Oh, there he is. So my question was is about, do we have the ability as a common council to refer an additional item to this body if it is created, if the language is not in the forming resolution, or does the language have to be included in order for us to be able to refer some other item to it?
Normally, the resolution that you adopt sets the authority and sort of the jurisdiction of any ad hoc body. And that says what you want them to look at. And if you decide you want something else to be looked at, you would normally you would either amend the resolution and say we want to give them additional authorities, or set up a new body or adopt a new resolution to send something to them that wasn't in the original one. So I guess that what I'm getting to is the answer to your question is, yes, if somewhere down the road you decide that there's something else that you want this committee or any other ad hoc committee to look at, you could introduce a resolution and say, we're hereby referring this matter to this body, and we amend their charter to be able to take up this issue.
Thank you, Attorney May. Alder Foster, any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So if we did want to do that, the recommendation would be to potentially amend this resolution at that time and then do a referral subsequent to that. So we wouldn't be able to just refer something that we wanted to without changing the resolution.
Thank you. Yes. Stefan, can you give everybody another quick instruction on how to raise their hands?
Yep. So if you take a look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see participants. If you click on participants, you'll have a pop-out on your right-hand side. On the bottom right-hand corner, you will see the raise hand button.
Thank you. Alder Heck, you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that there also in Legistar is the PSRC's recommendation that's slightly more focused and suggests that we add language that allows other items to be referred to this committee if they're camera related. And PSRC, I think, recognized that that's a little bit subjective as to whether or not something is cam related, but it certainly opens up some possibilities, yet also narrows the scope. I can't speak for all of PSRC, but I know that when we considered this item, I repeatedly said that I felt like PSRC was not the appropriate body to be taking up these matters because we don't have the expertise that the ad hoc committee members have and the surveillance committee have. And I feel pretty strongly we should take advantage of their expertise. Thanks.
Alder Martin.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that the scope isn't entirely focused, and there's kind of like a creep, like it's not entirely focused, and I'm a little worried about the clarity with the amendment, and I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I have Alder Foster again.
Thank you. I have a question. I think it's really just sort of for the body, but just thinking about in this kind of moment where we obviously we're running on real limited board committee commissions right now. None of us know exactly when things are going to exactly turn around. I'm certainly hopeful we'll be able to have more of our existing BCCs meeting soon. More of just a question in terms of the timeline, and is this realistic? Number one, should we be forming this now and with the timeline of having the work done by the end of the year if we're still in a place where we have existing committees that are unable to meet due to sort of technology capacity via virtual meetings? So just sort of a question I guess I'm posing to my colleagues as much as anything.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised, so if it's okay with the body, can I speak on this? Well, actually, Alder Harrington McKinney has raised her hand. So
yeah, yeah, I had my hand raised for quite a bit. These are the issues that I have a concern about. Is one is that we do need to have a fresh set of eyes, and specifically when Alder Kimball said one half of the original committee, if I'm quoting her incorrectly, she will take care of that. But the opportunity to take the work that this committee has created and look at it with fresh eyes. I disagree with my colleague on the Public Safety and Review Committee because one of the things is to have a robust community engagement. And what does that look like? The charge of the Public Safety Review Committee, one of those is undergirding a robust public engagement, and that's one of their charges, and they absolutely are well qualified to do that. My other concern is how rigorous would the original ad hoc committee be, because it is their work and there's a protection of that work, but how rigorous would that be, and would the opportunity come for us to begin to really look at it in a very significant way, again, with the new eyes. I do see a possibility of having a scope creep. I agree with the Alder when she said that being specific related to what we're looking at is very important, because when there is a scope creep, there is no definitive beginning or end, and it can evolve into what Alder Carter said. The question is this going to be a permanent committee? And it's not designed to be that way. Again, the Public Safety Review Committee has residents on that committee, has alders on that committee. The past co-chair of the committee sits on the Public Safety Review Committee. We have the ability to call in to our meetings testimony from other individuals. And so it is well equipped and well able to take this charge on. And then to not include the Public Safety Review Committee, to ignore that, is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do in terms of making the efficiency of the committees, the boards, committees, and committees, boards, committees, and commissions that we have, and to utilize them and the strength that they bring to the table.
Thank you. So if it's okay, I'll speak both on the amendment and the underlying motion. And so I am not supportive of the amendment. I just, as a number of colleagues have pointed out, feel that creates a pretty broad scope for the committee. And I think that the committee work is better done when the scope is clear. I do very much support for us to create a body-worn camera feasibility review committee. That is work that the ad hoc committee made recommended in one of their recommendations, recommendation 177. So actually this resolution brings forward to the next step one of the recommendations of the ad hoc committee. I do think that having members of the ad hoc committee on this body-worn camera feasibility review committee is a good way to have a balance of people who have had the conversations, the knowledge and the experience, with adding a couple of other people, again, a representative from PSRC and EOC, who will bring kind of a fresh perspective to the conversation. I also would say that one of the reasons that I am not supportive of adding kind of a broad scope for this particular committee is that, as you all know, the main recommendation of the ad hoc committee was to create an oversight committee and an auditor and an oversight committee. And I feel that a lot of these additional scope of work will need to fall within the role of the Oversight Committee, which again will be made up of residents of our city, and will be able to really take down on this additional role. And responsive to kind of what Alder Baldo has also mentioned, that Oversight Committee will be made up of, you know, a group of individual, maybe some members of the ad hoc committee, but certainly others too. So I do think that it's really important to move forward with the body-worn feasibility review committee with the narrow scope that creates. Narrow, but at the same time, a lot of work that still needs to happen. Again, understanding what Alder Carter had said about the fact that work has been done in the past around body-worn camera, but also knowing that it is time to pick up that work again and revisit some of the recommendation and come forth with some set of new, potentially revised recommendation to the council on how to move forward. I do see now, maybe I shouldn't have spoken, two hands are up, so I'll call on those. First is Alder Harrington-McKinney. Alder Harrington-McKinney?
All right, thank you. I did not lower my hand. So I think that everything has said. I will not be supporting this as well because it does present the opportunity overall to pass this work on, to review the work of the body-worn camera committee, that they did an extensive amount of work. That document is on a shelf, and to pick that up and revisit that, but to really have a very defined, narrow scope so that that work can be passed on to the Oversight Committee. And so to have this to take its place, I think that it will interfere with the ability for us to move scope with community engagement and to broaden aspect and have committee members, to have commission members and have members of that committee from a broader spectrum of the community than what we'll see now. And so I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you. I have Alder Campbell.
Just to clarify about the Oversight Committee, there has been a lot of confusion about what are we saying when we're talking about Oversight Committee. So I think there's at least three different things that we're talking about. Number one, the Citizen Review Board that we passed with the recommendation for an independent monitor, we passed that last year prior to accepting and adopting this report, because we recognized as a council it was so important and so critical to the foundation of any work we do to have that independent monitor and a Citizens Review Board, which has nothing to do with the ad hoc committee. So those are two things that we are in process and at some degree of process of already doing. Then when the report came, there was the recommendation of an oversight to oversee the implementation of all of these recommendations. So that was separate from the Citizens Review Board. And then we have the proposal that came out of the recommendation for an oversight of the recommendations to be just the body cam things. So we need to be careful about the language we use, because the Citizens Review Board is going to be that ultimate oversight committee that works with the Citizen Review Board committee that works with the independent monitor. That will not be, one of our committees or ad hoc committees or helping us to, well, I hope they do help us to make good decisions about public safety in our community, but it's a different animal altogether.
I do not see any additional hands, so I think that maybe we can do a vote. So the first vote would be on the amendment to the original motion. So that would be Alder Campbell's amendment And that amendment is to add a be it resolved clause to the original resolution that says, be it further resolved that the committee may address issues related to the implementation of other recommendations from the ad hoc committee report if referred them by the Common Council. So I will ask Kwesi to do a roll call. I don't think there's going to be a unanimous vote on this. So if you can, if we can unmute all, and then Kwesi will take the vote. So an aye is in favor of the amendment, and no is in not supporting the amendment.
All right. Alder Bedard.
No.
Alder Bedard is a no. Alder Harrington McKinney.
No.
Alder Harrington McKinney is a no. Alder Martin.
No.
Alder Martin is a no. Alder Evers.
Yes.
Alder Evers is a yes. Alder Carter.
No.
Alder Carter is a no. Alder Foster.
Aye.
Alder Foster is a yes. Alder Campbell.
Aye.
Alder Campbell is a yes. Alder Balde.
Alder Balde is an alternate.
Oh, okay. So we have 4 noes and 3 yeses.
So the amendment fails. And then if we cannot take a vote on the underlying motion, which is to establish the body worn camera feasibility review committee.
Okay. Alder Bedard.
Yes.
Alder Bedard is a yes. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Yes.
Alder Harrington McKinney is a yes. Alder Martin.
Yes.
Alder Martin is a yes. Alder Evers.
Yes.
Alder Evers is a yes. Alder Carter.
Yes.
Alder Carter is a yes. Alder Foster.
Aye.
Alder Foster is a yes. Alder Campbell.
Aye.
Alder Campbell is a yes. And Alder Balde is an alternate. So we have 7 yeses.
Thank you. That motion passes. So with that, we are moving to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 6. And by the way, given our time frame and the discussion that we would like to have, if at any point any members of the body feel that a motion for referral of some of these items is appropriate, you can also do that. So the next item is item number 6, requesting the Madison Police Department to create a summary document of MPD policies and procedure review ad hoc committee recommendations. Do I have a motion on that? Sorry, Alder Harrington McKinney, I'm looking for you. Your hand was raised and then it wasn't. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Yes. I move the adoption of item number 6.
Do I have a second? Alder Evers. Alder Evers, are you seconding? Sorry. Are you seconding? Yes.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions for staff or any first questions for staff? If you have some, raise your hand. I see none. Do we have any discussion on this item? I see nobody raising their hands. Yes, Alder Campbell.
Thank you. So I have a question for all of us. So we will be getting this document on a certain, which is 5/19, sorry, no. I'm just looking at the result, May 5th, 2020. And yet we understand that, so it will be sort of a progress report, or that's how we envisioned it, I think, as we were discussing this. And I would like us to talk about how, do we want this to be a living document? Do we want that May 5th document to be the first draft? and have continual updates to CCEC, because I doubt they're going to be able to implement 177 recommendations by May 5th. So I guess a question to the body for discussion is how do we want to use this document to do our work of ensuring that what we adopted by adopting the recommendations are done?
Do I have anybody who wants to discuss this issue? Alder Harrington McKinney.
Meets on a regular basis. And in that meeting, we could have that report done by the police. And so we could make that a living document. We can make that a part of the update that the police department does to the Public Safety and Review Committee moving forward.
Any additional comments? I see none, so I will move then to a vote on this item. So I will unmute all, and well, let me ask this. If you would like this to not be register as a unanimous vote, please raise your hand. Alder Balder, you do not want it to be a unanimous vote?
I actually have a question before we vote, if that is appropriate.
Sure.
Yeah. So my question is, why is it that the MPD can just give the updates? Why is it that we have to create this?
Is that a question for the body?
No, I mean, I think it's a question for maybe MPD or the sponsors of the resolution, if any. But
I think it's more appropriate to the sponsors of the resolution, because MPD didn't suggest this. So anybody else that would like to answer this question?
If nobody's answering it, I'll refer it to the city attorney to...
Alder Campbell would like to answer it.
Okay.
So Alder Bidar, Alder Rommel, Alder Alburis, and I are sponsors of this. And I spoke extensively with Alder Bidar around creating this. And in our discussions, it had to do with creating a tool for the council, because we are the body that is ultimately responsible for overseeing this. Having a tool that we can use to just keep track of this enormous body of work and to track the progress of all of those recommendations. So the reason, basically it's a tool for MPD to use and for us to use as we move forward with implementing all these recommendations. It's an organizational tool. That's how we were thinking about it.
I don't have anything to add that Alder Campbell described correctly as a co-sponsor, what our thoughts were. I don't see Alder Carter.
Thank you. So I guess my question is that there's 177 recommendations, and this could be to the sponsors or even to MPD, but of the 177 recommendations, are we saying that all of them fit the MPD, or are they looking at the recommendations that fit them?
I will answer the question as a co-sponsor. The idea would be that this grid, this document, would actually point out which agency is actually the lead agency to implement that recommendation. Some of them will be MPD, some of them will be MPD plus another agency, some of them won't be MPD, it would be another one, but it's asking MPD to create that summary document.
And so I understand what you're saying, President Badar. So I guess I'm wondering if there is a recommendation that does not fit, whether it's MPD or another agency in conjunction with MPD, is that something that they will report on?
Right now, the only request from this what's before us is for them to create this summary grid. It's not to do any other reporting. It's just to actually present a summary document to us. And then we can decide from that whether we want regular reporting by anybody. But what's before us is not reporting, it's just creating one summary document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other orders, so I think we should move to a vote. So I'm going to unmute everybody and ask Kwesi to call for a vote.
Okay.
Who's voting?
Alder Bedard.
Aye.
Alder Bedard is an aye. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Aye.
Alder Harrington McKinney is an aye. Alder Martin.
Aye.
Alder Martin is an aye. Alder Evers.
Aye.
Alder Evers is an aye. Alder Carter.
Aye.
Alder Carter is an aye. Alder Foster.
Aye.
Alder Foster is an aye. Alder Campbell.
Aye.
Alder Campbell is an aye. We have 7 ayes.
Great, the motion passes. We're now on the next agenda item, and I would entertain, actually, if possible, a motion on both 7 and 8 because they're kind of related. So this would be both accepting the final report of the President's work group to develop a citywide surveillance equipment and data management policies, and creating section 23.63 of the Madison General Ordinances to establish surveillance technology guidelines for departments. I think I have a motion by Alder Carter.
I move.
Both items 7 and 8, correct?
7 and 8.
Thank you. Alder Campbell for a second. Oops, sorry. Can I?
We're fighting the mute button.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to move to refer both these items to our next meeting in the interest of having our committee of a whole discussion. So,
is that Alder Carter? Would you entertain a motion for referral, or you would like us to accept this?
Yes, I will change my motion to referral for 7 and 8.
Attorney May don't like it, but okay. So the motion is actually a motion for referral, and Alder Campbell by Alder Carter, and a second by Alder Campbell. Anybody that wants to speak on the motion for referral? If not, unless I see any hands raised, we can have this registered as a unanimous vote for referral, and I don't see any hands raised, so Attorney May.
When are you referring it to? Your next meeting?
To our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion for referral, and we will record it as a unanimous vote to refer. That takes us to the briefing by Mayor Rhodes Conway on COVID-19 response. So Mayor, let me find you. Okay. Mayor, you are unmuted. Thank you for joining us, and I will turn it to you, the briefing.
All right, thank you. Can you all hear me all right? Excellent. So I have a relatively long update for you. I will try to go through it quickly. And there are at least a few deputy mayors and staff on the line that can answer questions as well if you have them. So obviously we are in the middle of a tremendous public health crisis. We have been lucky, I think, to have relatively low numbers of positive cases of COVID-19 and only a couple of deaths, although even one is too many. But we are still very much in the early phases of this, and we expect it to get worse before it's going to get better. And I think we expect that this will have or we know that this is already having a disproportionate negative impact on our most vulnerable populations. Certainly, it presents a tremendous challenge to our healthcare systems and healthcare workers, our first responders, and a number of other essential city staff. And it presents a tremendous challenge to our economy and to every household, I think, in terms of their own economic well-being as well. Our main focus remains flattening the curve and to do everything we can to prevent overwhelming our healthcare system with serious cases of COVID-19. At the same time, we have to protect and sustain our essential services and protect our employees as a city. The how of this is obviously complicated, and that's what I'm going to try and run through with you today. We are trying to maintain an equity lens on the work that we're doing here. And we have, as you know, restructured substantial portions of city government using the incident command structure and creating the Emergency Operations Center. And the reasoning behind that is because it allows us to respond quickly in an environment that is changing on a daily, if not more frequent basis. And it allows us to meet emerging needs as they emerge. And it allows us to work more effectively across the silos of our departments, which is one thing I've been incredibly impressed with in watching the EOC work, is the extent to which we are able to cut through the regular barriers between departments and really accomplish things. So I want to start with talking about the EOC structure, just to familiarize you all with that a little bit and give you some of the details of that. I believe you all received the flowcharts at the last CCEC meeting. Yes, Alder Martin, that is the flowchart. And so I refer you to that, but I will talk through, I think, each of the sections. So that structure, as you heard from Chief Davis, is based on the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. It has 4 sections plus a JIC, which is the public information section, and a liaison capacity, which is our connection to other institutions. The way that the EOC works is that information coming in is triaged through 3 people, the incident manager and the senior advisors. So that's the incident manager is Ed Rockriegel, and the senior advisors are Chief Davis, Chief Wall, and Rob Phillips has been in that role as well. So those folks are seeing all of the emails coming in and deciding what to do with them. There has been a relatively high volume. I think we had about 600 requests to the city OC in a week. And so they have asked high volume groups, which includes the mayor's office and also the council, to aggregate through individuals. So in our case, it's aggregated generally through me or my chief of staff. And in your case, it's aggregated through your chief of staff, so that they can be responding to patterns and issues rather than every individual request. Every email that comes into the EOC is read. They are not all directly responded to, but there is a daily log of all of the issues that have come into the EOC. And the requests each get routed to someone. So in some cases, they go back to the person who sent them saying, actually, this is something that you can deal with, and we encourage you to do so. In most cases, they get routed to one of the sections of the EOC to work on. And depending on the nature of the request, it might be an informational thing and it would go to the JIC. It might be a forward-looking planning thing and it would go to the planning section. It might be an operational need. It would go to the operations section. And so again, the three folks that are triaging make a decision on where it belongs and route it to the correct section. The incident command has daily meetings. It's a relatively small group of people so that those meetings stay productive. So we meet every morning, and those are for information sharing and problem solving. Mostly it's reporting back from the various sections on what's happened in the last 24 hours. We have pretty robust connections with other emergency operations centers. So in the incident command meeting, there is a liaison from Public Health Madison-Dane County who reports every day. Our incident manager has daily contact with the state EOC, daily conversations with the Dane County EOC, and 3 times a week briefings with them. And at least 2 times a week with the UW EOC. So each of these institutions has their own emergency operations center, and all of those EOCs are connected to each other through liaisons or through regular briefings. Staff are working on, Mr. Ruckriegel shared this morning that they're working on a pandemic, finalizing the pandemic plan. And that will be available in, I would say, a week or 2, and will certainly be shared with council. Each of the sections, and I'll talk through each of these sections, but overall, the structure of the EOC involves 106 staff. So we've got folks that are part-time on EOC and folks that are full-time on EOC, but there's 106 of them that are working in this structure. So the 4 sections, planning, operations, logistics, and finance, each have working groups underneath them. So the planning section is working on determining which services are essential throughout the city, a framework for reallocating staff between services towards things that are more essential. And they've been put in a tremendous amount of work on the election, which I'll have more to say about in a minute. They have a work group that is studying worst case scenarios and working on planning for them. They have a work group on repurposing manufacturing locally to meet needs. And they have a work group on economic recovery. A work group on teleworking for managers and employees. And they had a work group on the emergency order that I issued. The operations section is working across a number of areas, including public health, fire, police, public works, community services, homeless facilities, and the election. The logistics section is working across homeless facilities, purchasing, inventory, and personnel, with a particular emphasis on personal protective equipment, and trying to secure PPE and also secure the cleaning supplies that the city needs. The finance section is working across a number of areas as well: cost tracking, purchasing, time tracking, monitoring federal and state legislation, and risk management and safety services. The liaison function is led by my chief of staff and deputy mayor, Cam McClay, and they are working with major institutions in the community. We're expanding our reach to community groups, and we have a research section that is looking at a number of things, including what other communities are doing in response to the virus. And then finally, the Joint Information Center, the JIC, is working across media on sharing good information and getting the message out. including website, email, social media, standing up a newsletter, exploring text alerts, and making sure that we are getting things translated and or interpreted as necessary. So that's the EOC structure and a little bit of what's being worked on. Alder Badar, I defer to you. Do you want me to pause in between sections and take questions, or should I just power through and we'll do questions at the end?
I think you should power through.
Okay. So I'll keep going.
Jot down your questions while you're listening so we can go back to them.
Yeah, and again, happy to answer questions about any of this. So the next thing that I wanted to touch on was just some of the staffing challenges that we faced, and just give you some numbers around our efforts. So as of March 28th, about 480 staff, which is about 16% of our positions citywide, have recorded 11,580 hours against the COVID-19 project. So staff are all asked to track their time when they're working on something that's related to the virus. So that's a pretty substantial work effort to date, and it's only going up. We are working to track leave usage for staff to get a sense of how many folks have been impacted. At this point, I have numbers on the use of the newly authorized emergency leave, which you'll recall from our last meeting. We granted the equivalent of 2 weeks of leave to all of our employees. And as of March 28th, 213 employees have used 3,817 hours of the emergency leave authorized earlier in the month. The average use by employee is 18 hours per employee. We have spent over $100,000, so $108,435 on the COVID-19 response. That's not counting staff time, that's just actual expenditures. And we have some major upcoming expenditures. We're looking at a hotel block for first responders, which would be $165,000. And there's a number of purchases in progress that add up to about $50,000. So it has also been a not insignificant expense. I mentioned that we have about 106 staff dedicated to the EOC. And we're working on getting numbers on staff redeployment. But I can tell you that in the past couple of weeks, on any given day, we've had between 10 and 30 staff from other agencies that have been retasked with working for the clerk's office. And at least 8 agencies have been able to move staff to the clerk's office to help with the election, including library, parking utility, parking enforcement, parks, Monona Terrace, planning, building inspection, and fire. And we have somewhere between 75 and 150 employees from other city agencies that have been redeployed to assist with the absentee ballot backlog. And then we have some librarians and other staff that have been retasked with doing policy and research. So all told, that's probably close to 200 employees that are doing something different than their regular job. And it may be more because we know that we have staff within departments who have been moved from their regular job to work on more essential services. And we're not tracking that at the same level that we are cross-departmental reassignments. We also have about 1,300 staff that are teleworking part-time, if not full-time. And one of the things that we established is a framework. I mentioned this when I was talking about the planning section. We established a framework for essential services and identified within every department what essential services needed to continue and sort of no matter what. So we'd have to redeploy staff to them. what things could be delayed or stopped for the moment, and how we identify the varying levels of risk involved with these. So we broke down our services into 4 categories. The most simple category is agencies that do not have field services or are able to completely telework. And there are 8 agencies across the city that are at 100% teleworking. And then for field services, we have 3 categories. There are essential field services that must continue, and there are 69 essential field services identified in the city. And so our priorities there are ensuring the safety of the employees while we maintain that service, and if we need to, reallocating staff from other categories to maintain those services. The next category is non-essential field services that can be accomplished without multiple staff coming in contact with each other. So solo field services, if you will. And the departments have been asked to work through these. There's about 63 of these. They've been asked to work through these to determine whether the work is still relevant given the current situation. And if it is, and if it can safely continue, it should continue. If it's not currently relevant, then we're asking departments to reallocate those staff within the agency, preferably to the essential services category. If that's not possible internally, we're asking them to reallocate across the city to other essential services. And again, the planning team or the planning section has a mechanism for that. And then only as a last resort would folks be asked to not work and be put on paid administrative leave. The final category is the non-essential services that involve teams. And there was 31 services identified here. And so because we're all practicing physical distancing, the priority there is to reassign those staff either to be on projects that can be accomplished solo or to be on projects that are more essential. And then similarly, if that's not possible, to reallocate them within the city onto other work. And then again, finally, if it's not possible to make the functions safe to do, then to ask people to stop work and to move to paid administrative leave. In general, we're trying to keep everybody working, and we're trying to keep people working on the things that are most important around the city. So I know that was a lot, sorry, but I thought it was useful for you to understand how we're thinking about this. To facilitate all of this, HR has issued guidance and FAQs, and I'll be signing an APM soon on the various use of leave, how managers should think about accommodating workers, how they can think about risk and risk assessment, and so that the workers that are most vulnerable, either themselves or because of family members, can be accommodated and taken care of. And so most of this guidance is either is already available or will be available on EmployeeNet, which I believe you can access. So you'll be able to see it there. I want to mention a few Herculean efforts by our staff that are going on. And in the interest of time, I won't give you all the details, but I do just really want to call out the clerk's office. You know, they stood up curbside voting. They've issued over 72,000 absentee ballots. You know, they've got easily 3,000 plus pending requests. They're losing polling places and poll workers, and they're still managing to continue to plan for an election, which we may or may not have on the 7th. But it's really just been amazing, the work that they're doing. Similarly, our IT department has been phenomenal. You, of course, are familiar with the work they did to make our virtual meetings possible, but They also had to stand up telework for the entire city. And there's increasing demand from the clerk's office, from some of our frontline agencies. The EOC has needs. The process to reallocate staff across departments is in part a virtual process that relies on IT. Anyway, I could just go down the list. It's a ridiculous amount of work, and they're also having to do their normal maintenance of all of our IT systems. The treasurer's office has stayed open for walk-up this whole time, and they are taking on walk-up from other agencies like the municipal court, the police department, parks, building inspection, building permits, and engineering permits are all flowing through the treasurer's office now. So they've really been amazing in being willing to stay open. Metro, of course, is maintaining modified service at much reduced capacity, but is doing an amazing job of keeping that going and making sure that all the buses are cleaned in between every shift, and that we're doing as much as we can to keep both drivers and passengers safe. They're also focused on maintaining service to the hospitals so healthcare workers can get to work. And that's just, a few. I could go on and on about the work that our folks are doing that's been really amazing. But I want to switch then to talking about some of the issues that we are focusing on so that you have a sense of where the energy is going. So the first and foremost always is, how do we flatten the curve? How do we stop the spread of the virus? How do we preserve our hospital capacity? I hope that you all are looking regularly at the Public Health Madison-Dane County dashboard, which IT stood up for them. It gives you regular updates on what's going on and how we're doing in keeping the numbers lower than they might otherwise be. As I said at the top, we're also focused on essential services, protecting our workers, maintaining our staff levels. Payroll and vendor payments have to continue. We are talking about post-election closing MMB and CCB to walk up. Obviously, you all will still be able to get in, and anybody who works here will as well. But just in terms of safety, we think that's probably a prudent thing to do. I talked a little bit about the election. I'm sure you guys have seen the coverage and heard from the clerk's office. I did want you to know that, and Attorney May is here and can answer questions about this, but we did file an amicus brief with the federal court yesterday asking to postpone the election by at least 3 weeks, allowing all officials to stay in office until the results of the postponed election, and to consider an all-mail or an all-absentee election, which I think is just really necessary at this point in time, given the challenges that the clerk's office is facing. I'd be happy to talk more about that as well. We are also focused on the census, trying to get people to fill out the census, and weaving that message into what we're putting out. Obviously, we're focused on making it possible for this body and for the council to meet virtually, and working on standing up additional committees as quickly as we can. And I think that, as you can see here, the technology really is coming together, and I think that I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that relatively quickly. Many of our services have gone remote. I hope you've seen what the library is doing with their virtual library card and access to the collections. The development review process has also gone mostly entirely remote. And many of the ways in which our citizens or our residents contact the city is now all online or over the phone. And my sense is that it's going relatively well, but it may be too soon to tell. Some of our services have been suspended because it's not safe to provide them, or because we have insufficient staff. So one example is the yard waste drop-offs. We did put a hold on public works contracts until we could get safety measures in place. Those will start up, I think, next week again. engineering worked hard to get instructions to all of our contractors to make sure that the workers would be protected. The other, there's a handful of public health services that are also on pause that require direct contact between people. We're also focused, and I'll try and go quicker here, focused on providing services for our vulnerable populations. I think I've talked about the efforts around making sure that everybody has access to nutritious food. We're doing a lot of work to protect the homeless community. We have, at the moment, 274 at-risk folks that are in hotels that were formerly homeless. I'm sure you all saw that we've opened up the Warner Park Center as a homeless shelter for single men overnight to provide greater physical separation. We're working closely with Dane County and the nonprofits on this, and we're continuing to plan. We're definitely not done there. The Senior Center has been doing amazing work to connect with seniors. I'd be happy to share details or answer questions about that. We're trying hard to make sure that we're reaching out to non-English speaking populations and to folks that are differently abled to meet their needs. Then I just wanted to emphasize that we are coordinating with a bunch of other levels of government. I won't go into all of the details on all of the things that we're covering with them, but you should know that we're in regular contact with the governor's office, the county, the school district, the hospitals, UW, the United Way, and a number of different community organizations, as well as tracking national organizations and what's going on at the federal level. We are beginning to think about trying to mitigate the economic impact on the community, coordinating with not just the chamber, but also the Black Chamber and the Latino Chamber and other business organizations. And the thing that we just haven't really started on yet is any kind of recovery planning. And so that's actually maybe where I will end. I think the big ask from the EOC to the council is to be thinking about recovery planning and recovery policy. I haven't had a lot of time to think about what this looks like, but I'm hopeful that you all would be able to either as CCEC or in some other format take some of these questions on about some of the long-term impacts in our community and what we should be doing now to plan for them once we're able to start approaching business as usual again. So I guess let me just end by saying, this thing is completely reoriented all of my priorities. And I think most of the city's priorities. There's a lot of things that we all wanted to do that I think are just going to have to be on hold for a good long time now. But we shouldn't waste a good crisis. And we should be thinking about how we can come back from this thing stronger and in a more equitable way. And in building up the structures that we want to see in our city in the long term. And I think there's an opportunity to do that now. And I certainly hope that you agree and that we can work together on that. So sorry, Alder Badar, I know that was awfully long, but there's been a lot going on.
Thank you. Yes, I know it has. Thank you, Mayor, for the briefing. I want to ask the body whether you want to engage now in questions, which would take us into the next half an hour of our meetings, or whether the body would prefer to just move into a committee of the whole and have a conversation. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we move into the committee as a whole, because that allows all of us to weigh in on having a conversation, and that's the piece that's missing. So if I could have, that's my motion.
That is a motion. Thank you. And I think I have a second with the hand raised. Alder Evers.
Second.
Thank you. So we are now in the committee of the whole, which means that we are engaged in a conversation amongst all of us to discuss any reactions to, I guess, Mayor Rose Conway's briefing to us, and specifically next steps or thoughts about the role of the council during this COVID-19 emergency. So I will entertain raised hands. So I believe the next raised hand is, and again, this is a conversation amongst alders. So raised hand would be Alder Balde.
So, Madam Mayor, thank you for the update and all the work that you and the city are doing at these very difficult times. So you mentioned two things that are very important to me. One of them is the homeless population. So I know some of them, they've been calling me, asking questions that I do not have answers to. In many cases, I've referred them back to the city. But my question around that is that, would you know, or does any of your staff members know if all the homeless people are sheltered at this point? My second question will be the non-English speakers. Obviously, I come from a community where majority of us do not speak English. So I would like to know how your outreach is like with regards to those communities. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna do a point of order so that, because everybody is texting me with different ideas here. So we are in a committee of the whole. Attorney May, do you want to quickly explain how do we participate in the committee of the whole and who's part of the committee of the whole?
Well, the basic thing with the committee of the whole is that you kind of dispense with the normal Robert's Rules of Order, and you can have a conversation back and forth. Members of the body can ask other members of the body questions directly. The chair still has to maintain some sort of order in terms of where you go as it advances, so that will still be left upon you. I don't think they ought to be texting you questions. They ought to try and raise them. And I think in the committee of the whole, it's possible that even those members who are not members of the committee can participate, because that's allowed under the rules for council members at any committee meeting. So I think you could open it up to anybody there. That might get a little unwieldy, but I think that would be allowed under committee of the whole rules. Was there something else I didn't touch on that you wanted me to specifically address?
No, I think that's good. I just want everybody, because everybody is asking questions. So we now have, I asked so now it's questions to the mayor. And again, I just would point out for those of you who want to have a conversation amongst alders, that this is the time to have that conversation. So I have an alder who asked a question to the mayor. So I will find the mayor, sorry, and unmute her. Yes, Mayor. Sorry, wait. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead. No. Somehow it's not working.
Yeah, stop.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So yes, we're asking folks who are experiencing homelessness to connect through the regular providers, Alder Balde, because that's who is able to refer them to the correct shelter at this point. And so, for example, if they are in a high risk category, they would be referred to a hotel. Otherwise, they would be referred to one of the existing shelters. But that's the correct thing to do, is to continue to connect them with the homeless services providers. And I believe that we are accommodating all the requests as they come in. At some point, we will need additional facilities to do that. But at the moment, I think we're accommodating. In terms of outreach to non-English speaking populations, that's one of the things that the JIC is taking on this week. We've been regularly translating into Spanish, but working on getting more information out in plain language, in all languages, and then also in Hmong and Mandarin, Spanish, Hmong, and Mandarin being our top languages in the city. in addition to English. We do have other language resources, and hopefully are going to be able to roll out more of those over time.
Thank you, Mayor. I have now Alder Evers on the queue, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to remind my colleagues that we voted not to ask questions of the mayor at this time. We can submit questions at a later date or a later moment, but we agreed to discuss among ourselves in a committee of the whole about the appropriate role for Common Council and for CCEC in the time of crisis. So let's stick to what we voted for. Thank you.
Next, I have Alder Rummel.
Thank you, everybody. This is amazing. Like, we're meeting on Skype or whatever, this Zoom. I just think we're in a whole new world, and I actually feel almost confident at doing it. I want to thank the mayor for her report and just the report, and we know the incredible work that's been going on. I have to say, as a person who's trying to follow the new protocol, I kind of feel at a loss. Like, I send it to Kwesi, and sometimes, you know, I'm just not really quite comfortable yet with the way the council is participating. It feels like we're off on the sidelines as, like, you know, and even in that flow chart, we're not even like our own like important body of the flow chart. And I would like to ask the council if we're not going to be part of the EOC, which I think we should consider, can we have a member who's got daytime availability participate more regularly in some of the discussions? But if that is not considered, you know, a direction we want to take, can Common Council and Common Council Executive Committee meet every week? So we're not rushed for time, like we have 18 minutes, and we can really have these really robust information sharing so that we don't feel like we're only getting a little brief like summary at the end of the day. Like, this was not a brief summary at the end of the day. This was what we as policymakers need to know and share with our constituents. So we need more of this, not being, I don't want to be like the second class part of this government. And that's kind of how I feel right now. Thank you. But I support all that we're doing. I mean, I don't feel like mad at you or anything. I just want to be more, I want us to know our role and be more active and sharing the responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. I have now Alder Rohr.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I actually was going to say exactly what Alder Rummel said, especially about meeting more regularly. I think that would be really important, especially if we're thinking about doing recovery planning or starting to think about recovery policy outside of what's already happening. We need to be having conversations more regularly and getting these verbal updates. I think this kind of probably scratched the surface of all that's going on with the city. So having this more regularly would be helpful. And then also echoing what Alder Rummel said about having alders involved in the EOC process. I know that there's those 4 kind of umbrella groups that have staff members under them. Maybe alders could also serve as a part of those groups, or at least be privy to conversations and meetings that are happening in the planning, operation, logistics, and finance umbrellas. That's all.
Thank you, Alder Rohr. Alder Furman.
Thank you, President Badar. I think this certainly has been a really difficult time trying to figure out, obviously as alders, we run because we want to make a difference and help. And it certainly has been difficult trying to figure out what is our role. I will say, one, I very much appreciate what the mayor and the administration has done and EOC has done. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to try to put ourselves in EOC. We're part-time alders with other responsibilities. It's not our job to manage the process, but we certainly need to find a better balance to figure out to be more involved. And I think I think that message at least is coming clearer. I think we also just need to remember as alders that it does take a lot of time to set up these meetings, come to these meetings, get updates for these meetings. I'm sure the mayor didn't throw together that update in a few minutes. I'm sure she spent a ton of time on it. But I think it's important for us, obviously, to get an idea of what's going on so we could stay informed and be involved, but figure out that balance where we're not taking away a ton of effort that's taking place in EOC and throughout the city, where obviously we've heard staff are not necessarily doing their normal job. So I think it's important for us to continue to talk about what that balance is. And I think, the thing I've heard and spoken to other people about is, focusing on the recovery. I think that's one way for us not to slow down EOC necessarily, but also be useful in something that's going to be incredibly important. I think the landscape of the city is going to, and this country is going to change dramatically, especially as this goes on longer. And I think it's important for us to use our time to focus on that.
Thank you, Alder Furman. Alder Foster.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. And just looking at the clock that says 6:16 p.m. For our unprecedented first virtual Common Council meeting to start. So I just kind of real practically, I guess I'd like to put out there that I think we should, and perhaps Attorney May could give us some advice about what our options are, but I think we should really be talking about setting up another meeting, whether it's a CCEC meeting or an additional Common Council meeting, whether that has to be an emergency meeting, since it's not in the schedule, and just really maybe talk about the timing for that and do something really in the next several days even, or early next week, so we can have a much more robust committee of the whole conversation, because it's not going to happen today. And I think there's a lot on people's minds. There's a lot we really need to sort out. So this is unprecedented for all of us. But I think there's a lot of desire for people to participate and to start thinking about what our role is. So I guess I would just say, I think we need to right now probably talk about when are we going to do this work, because it's not going to happen in the next 3 minutes.
So thank you, Alder Foster. We'll take I'll put some ideas out there as a still council president, because I want everybody to know that this has not been something that I have not been thinking about. Things have been moving very fast, and I've been particularly busy in my day job. I think it was good for one of the elders to remind everybody that some of us certainly have a lot of kind of balances that we have to make as part-time elders. So I think that my proposal was going to be to have another CCEC meeting. I was going to propose to have the CCEC meeting on April 14, but I also would certainly entertain having a CCEC meeting next week. I would want to see us do collectively, maybe as subgroups, and Attorney May can then kind of lead us to how we do that, but to really try to come back to CCEC with some proposed planning from each of us. I think that we have a group of very, very engaged, and all of us can put together maybe some ideas of the roles, so that we can start our conversation at CCEC based on kind of some ideas and proposals that have been put forth, and discuss those, as opposed to kind of just starting again from scratch and just kind of putting ideas out there and having to take a next step of like them putting those ideas back in writing. So if that sounds like a possibility for all of you who are right now on this Zoom, I guess I would like to know, maybe just kind of some affirmation or collective about, one, do we want to meet at CCEC next week? And two, are people willing to have assignments given to them of things that they could do to prepare for the next CCEC meeting, so that we can talk through the different roles and things that the council could be doing? I think one of the clear ones that has come up is recovery planning. That is not something that right now, as the mayor said, because they're dealing, literally the executive branch is dealing with the day-to-day operations of our city. I think that is a role that we can take. So thinking about whether we could divide that kind of recovery planning and thinking around areas of interest like housing, employment, small business, food, transportation, and have different groups of elders based on their interests work on what would a subgroup working on those things look like, would be one way of doing it. Or we can just divide and have people just work on your series of ideas of the role of the council going forward, and then bring that to CCEC. So those are my ideas. I would entertain right now any reaction to it, in the next 5 minutes because we all need a break before we zoom back in. Alder Martin.
I personally prefer the idea of like assignments. I feel like right now is not the time for us to all kind of go independently, because I think that's how we start duplicating ideas, and we don't need to be worried about that right now. And I would like to make sure that we have our bases covered, especially in terms of like planning for recovery. And I really think that would be the most efficient way for us to move forward. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. And about meeting next week or in 2
weeks?
Yes,
totally. We should do it.
Okay. Alder Evers.
Yes, I'm in favor of meeting next week. And also, I think the discussion is not just about the tasks that are before us, but also our responsibility and obligation as our effective role. I am not satisfied with the flow chart. I feel like council has been pushed off to the side, and this body needs to seriously question our role in the event of an emergency. So it's not about just finding some tasks that we can do in the future, but it's asserting our statutory obligations as elected officials who are the legislative body in this city. And we have that obligation and responsibility. We need to discuss how we are going to fulfill that responsibility.
Thank you. Alder Campbell.
Yes to meeting next week. And I think I would like some of us to work with Attorney May to help come up with ideas about rapid council response to issues that come up, and how we can rapidly respond as ourselves as a body or as CCEC. And I feel like we need legal advice on that. So I'd be willing to work on that with Attorney May before our next meeting.
Thank you. Alder Carter.
I was just going to say, yes, for the meeting next week. I'm assuming that's going to be next Tuesday, and that I would like to work on small businesses and economic recovery. And anyone who wants to join me on that, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm hoping, Kwesi, you're taking good notes, or if you can listen to the recording, but that's great. Thank you, Alder Carter, for the very specific answer. That was great. And now I have Alder Heck.
Thank you. I agree with what everyone said. I just wanted to add that if we are going to work, some of us, on recovery efforts, it seems that inevitable that that's another reason why Alder's plugging into EOC is a good thing, because I see those efforts as eventually being very tied together. So I hope we can find a way to do that at our next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Alder Foster, and then we're going to have to kind of end quickly.
Yes to meeting next week. A couple of things that I think should be on the list are, one, taking a look at the information flows between council and EOC in kind of both directions, and revisiting sort of the expectations there, including maybe more frequent briefings, et cetera. I think looking at our board committee commissions and working on having the council create a list of meetings that we want to see happen over the next several months should be another item for discussion. And also, I think looking at getting a sense of where our virtual meeting capabilities are, as well as the protocols that we're using for Common Council and other BCC meetings, are things I'd like to talk about.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands raised. It's the hour of 6:24. So what I am hearing is a meeting next week. So I think that we'll take that on, and Alder Vice President Harrington McKinney and myself can work on setting that meeting of CCEC for next week with collaboration with our IT team who supports all of our wonderful meetings and who probably are already feeling like, wow, this is yet another meeting and we have the council meeting yet to come. So we'll work with that, and then we will try to summarize everything that everybody proposes, ideas of things we can discuss. And then I would say, please expect some some of these ideas to be coming back to you as the person that brought them forward to work on more detail around, so that you can present it to CCEC next week, if that's okay with everybody. We will also schedule another CCC for April 14, which was already kind of in the plan, so that way we have both weeks covered. We are not able to meet next week on April 7th because it is still election day. So we will find another date, and the 6th is Finance Committee. So we'll find, just so everybody knows, so we'll find another date, Wednesday or Thursday next week to meet. And we will be back in touch. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join the CCC meeting today. We do have one other item, which if I can have by affirmation that the rest of our agenda will be referred to the next regularly scheduled CCC meeting, which is the 21st. Would that be okay? I see no hands raised. So item number 10 and number 11 is referred to the CCC of 421. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, somehow I lost my Alder Foster.
So moved.
Thank you. Alder Martin.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will take this as a unanimous vote unless anybody raises their hand. I see no hands raised, and so we're adjourned for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Our counts agree.
Okay.
So I'm going to just give it a few more minutes to see if we can get our last 3 alders